Thank you so much for coming out. My name's Joey Wall. I'm Special Assistant at the California Natural Resources Agency. We were required to do a study on the suitability and eligibility of the Mokelumne River for inclusion in the state wild and scenic river system for Assembly Bill 142, carried by Assemblymember Bigelow. And we're here tonight to hear your comments and issues around the study report that we released a few weeks ago. So I really appreciate such a great turnout. We're excited to hear all of the comments and consider everything in an open and comprehensive way. Our job here is to run a process where we consider everything on the table and make recommendations to the legislature and governor in a study report. So we're planning on doing the meeting from 6 to 8 p.m. Though, of course, we'll be here afterwards. We want to hear everyone's comments. We're committed to being here as long as we need to hear all of what you have to say. And we'll be here to answer questions afterwards. Due to the turnout, we'll probably have to have comments limited to 3 minutes per person. But we'll, of course, be accepting written comments. If you have the wishes to speak or provide comment, please go to the back and get a speaker card and turn that in to Phil or Hannah, and we'll be randomizing those and lining up later. I want to introduce Phil Dunn, who's the lead consultant who did this study for GEI Consultants. He and his team did a great job. We also have Clabina Asante and Hannah Dunn in the back providing support. So Phil is going to provide an overview of the study. After that, we'll take comments and then be here to answer questions. And we'll be looking forward to receiving comments in written form as well. The deadline for written comments is February 28th. And we can provide details on how to submit those if you have any questions. So here's Phil, who can take us through the study. Thanks again for coming out, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Great turnout here. It's good to see everybody here. We already covered, Joey covered the people that were involved in the study. I've been involved in all of the state wild and scenic river studies that have been conducted to date, and this was certainly a challenge with the Mokelumne River. But I think we put a draft study out. It's only a draft right now, so everybody's comments, that's what we're here for, to hear comments on the document. Just a few ground rules. I think Joey already covered most of these. Obtain verbal written input on the draft report and hear a range of public opinion. So we've got about 30 speakers so far. We'll probably end up with about 40. So that should be a good diversity of folks. We have the sign-up cards and 3 minutes for folks. In terms of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, this is just very basic information on what the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is. It protects streams that are free-flowing, and that designation can include rivers that have diversions and have dams above or below those segments. And even smaller dams. So a lot of people question about, well, is it really free flowing? And most of the rivers in the Wild and Scenic River system right now are not what you might call completely free flowing. And they must possess at least one extraordinary either fishery, wildlife, scenic, or recreational value. So it only needs to have one and be free-flowing, and that meets the eligibility requirements for a river in the state system. The river segments are designated as wild, scenic, or recreational. If they're eligible, then they get designated, each of the segments, as wild, scenic, or recreational. That's pretty much based on how much development is in the watershed. So if you have a very steep canyon, that's, there's not going to be any real development. It's only going to be accessible by trail. That would be a wild segment. Scenic would have some additional development, and then a recreational section would have a road along it, or I always use the Lower American River as an example of a state wild and scenic river that's recreational. There's development all around it, so it's completely different type of a classification than a wild river. I list a few of the representative rivers that are in the system on the slide there, and hopefully everyone has a handout because I wanted everybody to have this information. It's a big report. It's, I don't know how many pages, 400 pages, and so this is sort of all you need to know in terms of a summary of the findings and the study itself. The river segments can be included into the wild and scenic river system just, through the legislature and the governor. They don't need to do a study. They can go in just without a study. But in several cases, and of course for the Mokelumne River, a study was required. And that's why we're all here. The state designation has similarities but differences with federal wild and scenic, and sometimes people get confused between the two. I'll be available for questions and answers afterward. Basically, the state system only is the immediate river corridor, where a federal system goes up a quarter mile from the river. So it's a much broader area. There's much more management involved compared to the state system. These are the key AB 142 requirements. Basically, that the Secretary shall study and submit to the Governor and the Legislature a report analyzing the 5 segments. That's what the report does. It evaluates the potential effects on utilities, public agencies to meet current and future water requirements, identify land and water uses that are enhanced, foreclosed, or curtailed, and provide for public input, and make a clear recommendation on suitability, non-suitability. And so that's where we are right now, is collecting public input on the study, and then we will release a final report by March 31st. Not really going to cover this too much, but just study methods. And if you look at the report, we looked at a lot of information, and all of the different stakeholders and user groups were really good about getting us information. I thank all of you, not directly but collectively, for providing information. We had a lot of support for information, whether you're for it or against it. Everyone really contributed information to us. There's a lot of information on this river because of the PG&E licensing in particular, and a lot of the water supply studies that were done. The long-term water supplies were very important as well. The process, just real quick, is to again determine the eligibility. Are these 5 segments each eligible? And then it's classified, those eligible segments, as wild, scenic, or recreational. Then we look at the suitability. Is the river suitable for designation? And then we make a recommendation. So just to get into the results, in terms of the eligibility, all segments were considered free-flowing. And again, I kind of described to you how that's defined. And so all of these segments do fall as free-flowing. There's not impoundments on those segments. And the fishery and wildlife values, they were excellent, but we did not conclude that those were extraordinary. But we did conclude that the scenic values were extraordinary in segments A, B, and then what we called C1. We divided segment C into C1 and C2. And the recreational values we found extraordinary in all segments. And basically there's just a continuum of different recreational opportunities, also scenic resources as well, but especially the recreation that you just don't find in most rivers in California, and really any rivers in California. My background, I'm a fisheries biologist. I've been up and down, I'm not going to say every canyon in the state, but a lot of them. And so I've seen a lot of rivers, and that's partly what we're looking at, is really truly what is an extraordinary value when we make this determination. So based on the eligibility, all 5 segments are eligible to include in the wild and scenic river system based on the recreational and scenic values. I've talked about the wild and scenic and recreational classifications. Those are summarized there. And then here is how we designated these rivers in terms of whether they're wild, the segments, whether they're wild, scenic, or recreational. Segment A1 and A2, we took segment A and divided that into A1 and A2, and we took segment C and divided that into C1 and C2. And in your handout, I think it's the next slide, we mention which of those segments, the specific boundaries of those segments. So basically, the area, the segment A starts out as recreational. There's very easy access. If you know that area, there's campgrounds right next to the river. That's recreational. And then the river pretty much goes through a fairly steep canyon without much, fairly remote, very difficult to get into, no real development. And so that is determined to be wild, segments A, 2, B, and C1. And then C2 we had as recreational, D as scenic, and then E at the very bottom, where again there's very easy road access as a recreational river. So I'm not going to cover all these, but just so you could see, this is what the specific recommendation would be here with these segments. Also, if you're unfamiliar with the AB 142, it did not ask us to look at the whole river from Salt Springs down to Pardee as a continuum. There's 3 places where there's PG&E facilities, and it was important that those PG&E facilities be able to operate and maintain, sort of without any interference, if you want to call it that, with wild and scenic river designation. So those 3 areas are, I'm going to say, a quarter mile where there are diversions, there are, small impoundments, and those 3 sections were specifically omitted from our study. So those are not going in as wild and scenic designation, and we didn't even evaluate those. In terms of the suitability, I think the main thing really is that the new dams or raising of dams on designated segments is precluded. That's the main thing that wild and scenic river designation does. It precludes a major dam, and it also precludes a raising of a dam like Pardee, where it would inundate part of segment E if it's designated as a wild and into the wild and scenic river system. So that is really the teeth. If I'd say the Wild and Scenic River Act has any teeth, that's where the real teeth are. And I think a lot of people are concerned about other things. We'll cover those, and I'll be available for questions and answers. But the real teeth of this is it precludes dams, new dams on those rivers. It does not affect existing, the existing status quo and what's there. Nobody's going to lose water rights. Nobody's going to go on people's property. It pretty much stays as it is. But that is the main thing that Wild and Scenic River designation does. In terms of existing water rights, water development, PG&E, O&M, operations, those are all unaffected. Those are all included as existing local water supplies. So there's no change to that. That's part of the existing condition. That's part of what even makes the river what it is. It's not, a completely natural river. But certainly it has the scenic and recreational characteristics are considered extraordinary. In terms of future local water projects, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but it would need to avoid, and these are words straight out of the Act, adverse effects on the free-flowing condition and natural character of designated segments, and particularly on scenic and recreational. Now, I'll get into that a little bit more. And timber harvesting activities could be curtailed within 200 feet of designated segments. That has rarely been triggered, to my knowledge, and you have a registered forester comes out. It's not precluded, but there's some additional work that would need to be done if there's timber harvesting within 200 feet of the river. It doesn't affect anything else above 200 feet. I don't expect you to read this small print, and there's nothing hidden in there, although it might look that way. This is, again, a summary of the potential impacts, and I cover this here, and then I have a new slide that I put together that I think might be a little more telling than what's in your package there. But basically, the existing land use, anything existing is completely unaffected by this designation. And I think if you were able to go to other wild and scenic rivers, and there's a lot of them, and go to those watersheds, if you ask those people, how has this impacted you? They would say, it hasn't. I mean, that's basically, other than somebody that wants to put a big dam on your river, that is what it's precluded. And I think that's important for people to know, that I really, if there were huge impacts to people's livelihood from wild and scenic river designation, well, you can see there's miles and miles that are designated and included in the system. And I don't think you'll find people out there that say, wow, this has had a huge effect adversely on my life, my property, my water rights. It just doesn't really have the teeth for those things, unlike other environmental laws like Endangered Species Act and California Environmental Quality Act, NEPA, all the regulations that are in California collectively, in my mind, swamp really what wild and scenic river does in a watershed. Certainly, it still is another small layer that if you're developing a future project, you have to look at it and say, is this adversely affecting the river segment? Is it the recreational and scenic values of that system? So it is another, what I'm going to say, a small thing that you need to look at if you're developing a future water project. If it's a project up in the watershed that's mining or recreation or anything that's above that corridor of the river from riparian to riparian under the state act, it's not going to affect those things. I think I'm going to go on to the next one here, because these are some of the what I call misconceptions, and they don't come up just in this. They've come up in every single study that I've been involved with. Impacts, land use, takings of private property. No, it does not at all. There's not even a management agency to do that. It's not actively managed. Wild and scenic rivers are not actively managed under the state act. Impacts mining. No, it's not going to impact mining in either existing or future. Roaring Camp is, a recreational area. Would it impact Roaring Camp? No. That segment that Roaring Camp is in is designated as recreation, and that's because there's access there. There's lots of buildings there. It's not a wild segment or a scenic segment. We're calling that a recreational segment. So that's what's expected there. And the continuing work there, or not work, but the recreational opportunities there are not going to be affected. In fact, designation could increase that if more people come out and want to recreate on the river that is a wild and scenic designated river. There's been some questions about water use during emergencies. Again, in those situations where you have a fire and you need to get water out of the river, nobody is going to say, oh, this is adversely affecting, the Wild and Scenic River Act. Because your river is in that system, you can't take water out for an emergency. I just have never seen that happen, and there's been fires on the northwest California where they've had to get into some of the rivers, and they're Wild and Scenic rivers, and it never even comes up that, oh, you can't get in there because it's a Wild and Scenic river. And in this case, it's designated recreational and scenic. So if helicopters or emergency water use is needed out of that river, you just go, you're going to take it, and nobody is going to challenge that and say, oh, it's Wild and Scenic River. You're somehow harming the recreational value of that river for that temporary use. Somebody that makes that argument is just going to get shot down. It's not going to happen. Impacts using fire retardant in the watershed. Again, it's the same thing. That emergency is going to take precedent over Wild and Scenic River designation. It bans logging in watershed. No, it does not. There are those special treatment areas within 200 feet of designated river segments. If you are not within 200 feet of those designated river segments, a state putting a river in the state system will have no effect on that. New layer of state regulations, management. I say nearly no because there is a part of Wild and Scenic River where you have to look at are there adverse effects on the free-flowing nature, which in this case it's already affected, so I don't see that as a stumbling block. But would it adversely affect the recreation and scenic values of the river? Stops all future water projects. No, what it does is, again, as I said, any new dams on those segments would be precluded, and that's the big one there. All new industrial ag diversions on designated segments would be precluded. If you were increasing domestic use, then the Secretary of Resources and the State Board, there was a study that's Appendix E to our report, and since 2005, there's been a number of water rights, domestic water rights, and I think all of them but one was approved. And those are future domestic water rights. That's not just existing, that's in the future. All water projects downstream are allowed. So any projects that are taking water out of Party Reservoir, that's no problem. Those would be unaffected. Lastly, in this last bullet, we talk about special provisions. And okay, so what are the special provisions? Even though Wild and Scenic Rivers has virtually no effect except for the preclusion of large dams, if you're looking to develop future water supply and future water rights, then you do need to look to see, is it adversely affecting the river? In those cases, some of the water districts have been concerned that, well, we would like to have something a little more secure than just general Wild and Scenic Rivers. So special provisions have been added to many of the rivers that have gone into the Wild and Scenic River system that help protect water rights. And PG&E obviously is concerned about, even though their segments are or their reaches are not part of what would be designated, they're still concerned that they're able to do their ongoing operations and maintenance, and the local water districts want to be able to make sure that they can provide additional supply in the future, however much that is, that they can provide local water supply. And so the special provisions, those are, we've come up with 3 of those that help protect the water rights. So the study recommendations are that all 5 study segments can be included in the system. They meet the fundamental purpose of the State Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. They allow feasible future domestic water supplies that do not adversely affect designated river segments' free-flowing condition and natural character, particularly scenic and recreational. And so that's, some would argue that's a little bit vague, Phil. You know, it's saying, well, would some of these water projects adversely affect it? And I think from a free-flowing condition standpoint, you already have diversions in this watershed. So then it's a question of, well, how much more could you have? Well, it really depends on the project, but certainly I think you could take water, if you look at the recreational and scenic values. If you look at scenic values, well, what is a scenic value? It's the water in the river, of course, but it's the trees, it's the rocks, it's these great cliffs, it's the sky. It's kind of the whole, that whole system is part of the scenic resources. Now, if you were, and this is just hypothetical, but if you're taking, let's say there's 400 CFS in the river and you have a domestic water project that's going to decrease it to 370, 30 CFS. That's quite a bit of water, from 400 to 370. I doubt any of you could tell the difference from a scenic standpoint that there's 30 CFS less in that river, or if it went from 90 to 82. I'm just hypothetically making up these numbers. But to me, to say that's an adverse effect on the scenic resources, I doubt it. And then you look at recreation. Now, some of the rafting has to have certain flows. If it doesn't have those flows, you can't raft the river. But again, those are these limited time slots. And to say that it would adversely affect the recreation, which is the camping, the fishing, and everything that goes on there, again, there's room for domestic water supply increases with this river. So ultimately, what we're recommending is to include all 5 eligible river segments in the system, but with special provisions that have been used on some other designated rivers for greater protection of future water supply needs. And we have this as, well, it's a handout that shows our designations. And I put these special provisions in here so you don't have to wade through a giant report. If you want to look at those, I mean, they're somewhat legalistic in terms of water rights, but we feel it's important to include those. So I'm not going to go through those individually. So I'm almost done here. I've been talking too long. Next steps. Well, we're going to get public input tonight. It's being filmed, so we'll have a great record of everybody, what input is received. If you have written comments you want to give to us tonight, that's great. We also you have till February 28th, so there's still a couple more weeks. There's the address that everybody should have to send comments to Joey. We'll consider all comments received. We will revise the draft report as appropriate to produce the final report, which would go to the governor and legislature by March 31st. The legislature will consider the study report and other input and make a decision on that. And then the governor considers the legislature recommendations. Anything else?
Yeah, just one quick piece. Due to additional interest in public comment, we've received some requests, and if you have additional requests, please come to me. I can provide you my contact information or just stay till the end of the meeting to talk. But the East Bay Municipal Utilities District asked to host a public comment meeting that we'll be attending. on February 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. in Oakland at the East Bay Municipal Utility District Boardroom. We will also be considering an extension. I received one request for an extension of public comment, and please talk to me if you would be interested in a 1-week extension. That's something we can consider. It's something we have to balance with the timing of the study and our need to get it to the legislature at a certain point. So, and the revisions that have to be made on the contract for the study. So we're very open to what the public comment needs are from all of you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight.
I think if people could try to stay at 3 minutes, that would be great. We have about 30 cards.
All right, my name is Pete Bell, and I will be far less than 3 minutes. I am Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Foothill Conservancy. I sit on the ERC, the committee that helps PG&E do its environmental monitoring and adaptive management program. As a matter of fact, I am the sole remaining negotiator of the license. I want to say, first off, thank you for a pretty thorough job in this study. The only thing I would ask is that you look very closely at designating wildlife, at least in the Devil's Nose corridor. You are already aware that we have what turns out to be a very robust population of foothill yellow-legged frogs in that stretch of the river, although the first time we surveyed for them, we only found 3 frogs. Now, we don't have enough data yet to say definitively, but the data that we do have is giving us indications that this is a very unique population of foothill yellow-legged frogs. In some of the lifestyle choices, some of the breeding activities are pretty remarkable. So I would ask you please to consider that, and I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Pete. John Heisenhuddle.
John Heisenbuttle, representing the Calaveras Amador Forestry Team. The team is a group of volunteers that largely works to generate grants for forest restoration, fuels reduction in Calaveras and Amador County. Since 2015, we've raised a little over $10 million for the 2 counties, their fire safe councils and others, BLM, to do forest improvement work. At the same time, we try to do objective analysis of potential projects that the Forest Service does or BLM does, and in this case, the report that you folks have prepared. And I got to tell you, Phil, you're a very effective advocate for wild and scenic river designation. Anyway, the group has professional foresters, wildlife biologists, GIS expert on both sides of the river, Pat McGreevy, who I think most of you know, lives in Glencoe. He's our GIS expert. Anyway, we really tried to do an objective analysis of the CNRA study, and like Phil mentioned, it's almost 400 pages of work. One addition we'd suggest is what's changed in the river corridor since 1931 when Salt Springs Reservoir was built. We don't think a heck of a lot has changed. So what's the real purpose of designating the river as wild and scenic? We're concerned that the special provisions do not adequately protect future water needs. It talks more about existing water needs. And we look at sections 3.6, 2.2.8, and 2.5.5 and find that there'll be some restrictions on future water use. That's a concern. Free flowing, that's kind of an oxymoron. The headwaters is Salt Springs, and it's not a small impoundment. It's a huge impoundment. And so free flowing is a real stretch in our view. One of the recommendations we have is, and you mentioned this in your report, for the McCloud River and Deer and Mill Creeks, the legislature chose not to designate them as wild and scenic, even though they could be classified as such under the analysis you did. Rather, they chose to say no dam shall be constructed, and left it at that. That would avoid, even though, Phil, you say it's only a small layer of additional regulation, it's still a hook for lawsuits. And language that concerns us is no changes shall cause an adverse effect. You used adverse effect several times in your presentation. That's a hook for lawsuits. And we live in a litigation-crazy society. So while you say it will have no impact, we can see future lawsuits from advocacy or organization over any changes to the river. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, John.
Good evening. I'm Chris Schutz with the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. CSPA has a long history in the Mokelumne watershed. We were involved most recently in the Mokwise stakeholder process, where many stakeholders from water agencies and non-governmental groups got together and tried to work out projects that we could all support and agree on. CSPA supports wild and scenic designation under the State Act, but we also understand that there have been concerns expressed about it. One of my favorite stories is about a man who gets directions to a great fishing stream. It involves a cow under a tree and a right turn and concludes you can't miss it. Of course, our hero, the fisherman, has to make many decisions before he ever gets to that legendary cow. Not turn down forks in the road that cause him to get lost. As anyone who's ever followed directions or given them to such a fishing Shangri-La will know, where you don't turn can often be as important as where you must. This study makes clear that many of the concerns people have expressed in the past don't need to be concerns at all. Wrong forks in the road that can be answered through clarification. It makes clear many of the things that state designation will do, but also things that it won't do. It allows decisions based more on fact and less on fear, and that is a very good thing, and I thank you for it. Thank you very much.
My name is Marty Crane, and I live in Valley Springs. Section 4.3 of the study on scenic values was particularly challenging because essentially you had to paint pictures with words. You did a fine job. You also did a good job of explaining the importance of preserving natural beauty in the modern world. I'm handing you a list of excerpts that I'll be addressing tonight and request that you retain them in the final report. Throughout your report, you reveal and cite that high-quality scenery, especially scenery with natural appearing landscapes, enhances our lives and benefits society as a whole. People are concerned about the quality of their environment, including the aesthetic value of landscapes. As urban pressure demands more land for development, natural appearing landscapes that were once plentiful are becoming scarce. In addition, scenic landscapes, particularly in recreational settings, help to determine the success of local recreation and tourism. Research findings support the logic that scenic quality and naturalness of landscape directly enhance human well-being, both physically and psychologically, and contribute to other important human benefits. You go on to cite heavily forested areas and canyon walls that consist primarily of tall ponderosa pines, incense cedar, and California black oak, along with understory shrubs and riparian vegetation. Vegetation that is lush and green, with many low-growing ferns and mosses that create a cool, moist environment that provides a welcome sense of relief during the hot summer months. You draw our attention to the native dogwood trees, wildflowers, and colors in bloom, along with deciduous trees scattered throughout, and steep canyon walls that turn a golden yellow. You remind us that as the river meanders, each view is composed of harmonious elements that form a unique and memorable picture. The scenic integrity as a whole is considered to be extraordinary, with a natural appearing unspoiled wilderness experience, assigning segment B to USFS SMC Scenic Class 2, denoting high value. You reminded us of the gray colors of the rock and boulder-lined river corridors, rapids and pools, texture, green mounded forms with deciduous and evergreen trees on the canyon walls, creating a pleasing contrast to the rock-lined water corridor. Based on the combination and unique integrity of the geologic, hydrologic, vegetation, recreation, and cultural resources in these segments, the scenic views and values are again considered to be extraordinary. Because human presence is light, the area has a strong feeling of remoteness and solitude, intact and unified, and of high scenic quality. Thank you for painting this vivid picture with words to help all who may not have personally visited and experienced our rivers, or who don't realize the value and impact to the health of those who live and visit, or to the economy of our local communities. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Christine Coleman, and I've been a psychotherapist for about 32 years. I've lived in this community for about 26 of those 32 years. So I spend a lot of time thinking about our mental health, not to mention my own, and how we can best take care of ourselves. And one of the things that I have learned in the course of my work is that the ways that we heal and the ways that we best take care of ourselves is through using our body and using our senses and being out in the natural world. What better place to do that than at the Mokelumne River? You know, it's really important for us, and in my readings, there's a wonderful fellow by the name of Barry Lopez. He writes about his travels all over this country, and one of the things he says is, you know, we need to know our landscapes. We Americans need to know our landscape. We need to become intimate with it. And by doing so, we keep an eye on it and it's protected. And I probably don't need to tell this group so much, but the fact of the matter is that the Mokelumne River is a landscape I know very well. I'm very intimate with it, and it's had a wonderful effect on my life, and I want it to be here to have a wonderful effect on my children's lives and their children's lives and so on. And so psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, the river is a place to take ourselves, to heal ourselves, to feel good about our lives, and to immerse ourselves in an amazing environment. You know, it's interesting, in reading the report, you talk about the scenic, how scenic it is and how important it is that we see and experience the scenic, reality. For me, it's an immersion. It's about being immersed in an amazing, beautiful, dynamic, environment that we can lose ourselves in, and that I have often lost myself in when I've needed some time to reflect and contemplate, or that I go to when friends of mine and I need to do some talking and some enjoying life. So I just think it's so important that we understand the importance of our natural world and that we protect that place for those who are coming along behind us. And that the other point I wanted to make tonight is what I've learned is that play is an extremely important part of mental health, and it's an extremely important part of development for children. And our ability to play and to enjoy our environment is a hugely healing thing. And so obviously the river is a place to play, whether we get on rafts or whether we sit on the side of it and just watch it go by, whether we take our children to its edges and play there. You know, play is what keeps us vital and keeps us healthy and able to overcome the many, hurdles and obstacles that we all face in our life. So obviously keeping California, keeping the Moke wild and scenic speaks to all of that. So thank you very much.
I have a posse. My name is Tom Infacino. I live in Pioneer. Thank you for recommending wild and scenic designation for the Moke. As outlined in Chapter 3 of the draft study, the river flows with water and power to meet our needs. Wild and scenic designation will dedicate 5 segments of the river to the other gifts the river has to give for current generations and currently and for future generations. As noted in Section 4.3 of the draft study, the river flows with beauty. As also noted in Section 4.3 of the draft study, the river flows with healing peace. As depicted in the photos in Section 4.4 of the draft study, the river flows with the blessings of simple and glorious joy. And when the river flows with that beauty and that peace and that joy, the river makes music. There is a song written by the late civil rights, labor, and peace activist Bob Fitch. That song is entitled Mother River. It's sung to the tune of Oh Freedom, and sometimes it sounds like this. Mother River, Mother River, Mother River, carry me from the mountain, through the canyon, to the valley and the sea. Mother River, Mother River, carry me. But more often, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mother River, Mother River, Mother River, carry me from the mountain, through the canyon, to the valley and the sea. Mother River, carry me. Stand up and clap your hands. Mother River, Mother River, Mother River, carry me from the mountain, through the canyon, to the valley and the sea. Mother River, carry me. Slow it down and bring it home. Mother River, Mother River, Mother River, carry me from the mountains, through the canyon, to the valley and the sea. Mother River, Mother River, carry me.
My name's Joe David. I live over in Tuolumne County. I drove up, as I often do, to enjoy the river. I used to play a lot of the Stanislaus when I was younger, and of course, we know what happened to that. Once a river like that is gone, it is gone forever. And in the meantime, you have such a precious resource. Sorry. I came over from Tuolumne County. We lost the Stanislaus River over there years ago. Once something like that is gone, it is gone forever. I've been coming here with my family since I came as a young man and came and paddled the river. The Mokelumne is so unique as a recreational resource because it's a perfect beginning type paddle. Now that I'm entering my 60s, I go there for the same reason, because it's a very gentle, safe place. It's so unique, so many sections, and you people from here, you need to understand what an absolutely precious resource this is, and anything you can do to hold on to it, you want to do. And basically that's it. I go along with your recommendation, and I agree this needs to be preserved and protected. Thanks.
Anthony Worster from Mokelumne Hill. I'm here representing the Calaveras County Taxpayers Association. And I think a few years ago, they opposed the designation of wild and scenic only for the reason that they want to protect the future water needs of Calaveras County. And we still have the same stance. And then, speaking for myself, as a private citizen, I am concerned. I love the Mokelumne, and I also really like the hydroelectric plant. If you've ever gone over there, just to hear the sound of the water rushing, and just to see what the process is generating electricity, it is really beautiful. I mean, it is fantastic. And I think the river is absolutely gorgeous, even where the power plant is. But my deep concern is there seems to be no process in place to protect our future water rights. Let's say we have a horrible drought, which is referred to somewhere in the study. But let's say we have a 2 or 3 or 4 year drought, and things are really worse than the last one we went through. There's nothing in there that ensures that we could add one more diversion, or we could hold more water up above the scenic parts so that it could stay colder and we'd have a little extra water to let down in hard times. So there is absolutely, even though the best wording for the provisions to safeguard the future rights to water, additional rights over what we have now, there's nothing to ensure that it will get into anything the legislature passes. We have absolutely no control over that. Now, if we could get a promise from the legislature and the Governor Brown, I would say go for it. But that is my main concern. Thank you. And I hope you can address it.
My name is Ty Childress from Mokelumne Hill. A point that Ms. Coleman just made caused me to think about that term, scenic river. It kind of implies that the main value of the river is something to be seen for its scenic beauty. That's obviously important, but when you're there, it doesn't take long to realize that you experience river with all of your senses, and I think the designation really should reflect that in some way, which I can't really get my head around here. But the report also states that the array of both relaxing and challenging recreational opportunities and values that are offered by the Mokelumne River is unique among western Sierra Nevada rivers and already designated state wild and scenic rivers. Having boated, hiked, fished, and photographed in many Sierra Nevada watersheds, my experiences completely validate this finding. The diversity of experiences available to visitors here is unparalleled. This type of accessible, unspoiled, mid-elevation river is hard to find anywhere in California. Much of the 37 miles of the proposed addition is accessible by two-wheel drive vehicle. Some, of course, is difficult to access even by foot. There are swift-flowing trout riffles, deep, clear swimming holes, easily reachable from the Salt Springs Reservoir Road. I've lived in Calaveras County for 40 years. I love the river that defines our border with Amador. Much of it remains as it has for hundreds of years, unchanged, except by the natural forces of flooding, freezing, and wind. It still shows the vestiges of the Miwok people who lived in bounty on its banks. Dams adorn watersheds to the north, south, east, and west. Let's just let this little section of river be. I have a few photographs I would like to also offer of sections.
Good evening. My name is Savannah. I live in West Point, and my family's been going to the Mokelumne River for generations. You can date our lineage back to 1880s. I want to thank you again for recommending wild and scenic designation for the Mokelumne River in your draft study. You are correct that the river possesses extraordinary scenic and recreational values. In 2014, the scenic and recreational values of the river inspired Mariel Zellers of Valley Springs to write 3 poems. She's not here tonight, and I'm going to read I Am the Mokelumne. I am the Mokelumne. My time has been measured by the granite clock of the mountain. My flow has been memorized by the earth. My story has been told for generations. But I fear my water can no longer match your thirst. You will drink until all your memories taste like bitter cherries, until all trace of what I am is gone. And yet it's not too late for you to keep 37 miles between reservoirs at Salt Springs and Pardee, just wild enough to preserve my dignity. In return, I offer beauty as rare as phantom orchid that graces the wilderness, blessed with my name. In return, I fill your glass. I provide for black bear and the deer. The Phrygian falcon nests in my cliffs. I give refuge to purple martin. In return, I whet the beak of the bald eagle and spotted owl. Mountain, alder, flowering dogwood, azaleas populate my riparian land. I give you rainbows to eat. Thank you.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Dennis Rodman. My family owns the Roaring Camp Mining Company, which is just above the confluence of the South and the Middle Forks. We've been there we built a road down there, probably almost 50 years ago. So we've been in business there a long time. We're actually the only other private business on the river other than PG&E. And I was born in, I wasn't born here, but I was raised here in the county, in Amador County. And that river's been a big part of my life, and I certainly wouldn't want to see anything happen to it. And so we're not, per se, we support a wild and scenic river, except for the ways that it could influence our family business. We all, there's probably 9 or 10 members of the family that work and have worked there for a long time, plus a whole handful of other ones that come in the summertime. So we've got 4 generations. It's truly a family business. What we worry about, and I'm going to meet with Joey, so I'll make this fairly brief. Joey and I are going to meet next week and discuss some of this stuff. But what I worry about, I don't worry about the state designation of the wild and scenic, but what I worry about is that so many times it leads to a federal designation. And the federal designation means that we couldn't exist there. Even in a recreational designation under the federal way, it's a quarter of a mile in either direction from the river, that you can't have buildings or can't change anything. And so that means we could never add anything. If buildings potentially burned up, we may not be able to replace them. So it gets very serious. And also the mining that we do, we have a lot of recreational mining there at the camp. Roaring Camp Mining Company is why it's called that. And if you have a recreational designation and it's BLM mining claims, you can still operate there pretty much like it didn't matter. This is the federal designation now. And the reason I'm worried about that is that once the state approves it, whatever the state says is what you end up living with lots of times. So just to make this briefer, what I'm wanting changed is I'd like to have our deeded property on the Mokelumne River excluded from any designation of wild and scenic. It's not a very big stretch of the river, but I would like to have that excluded, so when this goes potentially to the federal designation, that, you know, the federal designation by the BLM, who did a study in 2007, they designated that as being excluded. And so I'd like the state to reflect that. And also the mining claims, I'll go over that with Joey, and then we can put it in writing so I don't bore anybody else here. But we're just concerned about survival, that's all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Evett. I'm the president of the board of the Foothill Conservancy, resident of Volcano, California. I'd like to thank the Natural Resources Agency and GEI for doing an excellent job on this report. I think it's very thorough. It complies fully with the mandates of AB 142, which had broad bipartisan support in the legislature and broad support in our counties. People wanted a study done. Now we have a really good study that lays out the facts about what wild and scenic river designation does and doesn't do, and what it will and won't do on the Mokelumne River. We'll be submitting some detailed comments in writing, but I just want to note that in talking to people, I've been in a number of meetings about this in recent weeks, and what I'm hearing is that the report has answered a lot of the questions that people have had about wild and scenic designation, and I applaud you for getting that, the word out like that. And as Mr. Schutz noted, it's good to have answers that are based on data and analysis and an independent look based on the facts. Our hope is that the parties who are interested in the river can find a path to protect the river while allowing for future water supply. I think the report amply demonstrates that future water supply is possible on the Mokelumne River without harming the river, depending on how the project is designed and operated. One thing that I would ask you to add to the study is any comments you receive from the tourism promotion agencies in Amador and Calaveras County, because I think the section on the tourism, the positive tourism impacts of having a wild and scenic label on a river are understated in the report. I think also, especially after hearing Mr. Rodman's concerns, it might be helpful if the report expands a little bit on the history of the interrelationship between California designated rivers and federally designated rivers, including noting that no California state designated river has been added to the system for many years. And my understanding, and Mr. Evans from Friends of the River can correct me if I'm wrong, is that no California river has been taken into the federal system through the Secretary of Interior route since the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was amended in 1982. And I think it would be good to have the report be clearer on that federal and state designation. But again, I think the report amply demonstrates that we can have our beautiful river. I've spent many, many hours in that river canyon, and we can have water for our communities too. And I thank you for doing such a good job. Thanks.
I'm Sherry Curtis, and I have property in Calaveras County and Amador County. And I just want to say that if you still have questions about what Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is read the law itself. I heard a consultant up here say there's no effect on private property. But if you read the law, it has the right for condemnation in the Rivers Act, and it can't take it unless it gives you just compensation. Because it hasn't taken any maybe so far, but you better talk to your realtor to see if you have to disclose that if you want to sell your property if you're along the river, because it's full disclosure that you'll have a cloud hanging over your property title. I have been here for almost 30 years and really haven't noticed the river going away. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I don't think the scenic value or the clear water is ever going to go away. It hasn't, and it won't. I don't know what you're trying to protect, except that you may be taking water away from people and the ranchers, because in the law it doesn't protect agriculture, water, industrial, or commercial waters. It only promises to protect domestic water. I think it would be beneficial if the study would include the cost and all who paid for it. I think the public needs more time to review the study. The GI Consultants Incorporated asked for a 3-month extension and received it. I am asking for a 3-month for the public also to review it. It's not fair. It was just released, and they want to give us another week to have to really comment on it. The study does not include all the former studies, which were mostly very old studies, referred to in the text of those studies, referred to by GEI, and only lists them in the appendices. So there is no way to verify the conclusions of GEI for this study. Not all studies referred to had been completed. U.S. Forest Service, 1990. Not all of the segments under the consideration for wild and scenic in this study had been studied in the U.S. Forest Service in 1990. A misrepresentation that the GEI study makes is that all the segments of the river have been environmentally and thoroughly completed studies. If so, where is the record of decision for the U.S. Forest Service 1990 study? It should be included in your study. The study seemed to cherry pick what it wanted to include. The Calaveras Board of Supervisors rescinded their support for the wild and scenic status of the Mokelumne River, and that resolution should have been included. The Amador Board of Supervisors did not support the designation of wild and scenic in 2 of the bills introduced for inclusion in the wild and scenic designation in the last few years. The Amador letters of opposition, along with all the water agency letters of opposition, should be included in the study. AB 975 information should be included in the study. That was where they wanted to make the California Wild and Scenic study comparable to the federal and include 1/4 miles on each side.
Please submit the remainder of your comments written to us, or that's over.
I just have...
that was 4 minutes. We have to be fair to everyone in the room.
All right. Well, the Tiger Creek segment as wild, just above that is not wild. There's a road and a trail, so you can get to the river, so it needs to be reclassified. Thank you.
I've been asked to read this statement on behalf of Bruce Judici, who's candidate for Calaveras County Supervisor, District 5. He couldn't make it tonight. I want to thank the California Natural Resource Agency for its thorough study of the California Wild and Scenic River suitability for the Mokelumne River between Salt Springs Dam and Pardee Reservoir. Along with many in this hall, I strongly support the study's recommendation to include those 37 miles of the North Fork and Main Mokelumne in the California Wild and Scenic River system. Understanding the unique and attractive attributes of these river segments makes it imperative to enact this wild and scenic designation. Designating the Mokelumne a state wild and scenic river would not adversely affect existing water rights, land uses, hydropower generation, river recreation, hunting and fishing, agriculture, grazing, or public land use. No private lands have ever been condemned along a state wild and scenic river, and designation does not add new condemnation authority. And this designation will have limited effect on private land timber harvest and no effect on public land management. The study also recommends special provisions that would allow Calaveras County to divert additional water in the future to meet our domestic needs. What this designation will do is preserve the area's natural attractiveness to visitors from outside the area, bringing tourist dollars to local businesses that will benefit the area in perpetuity. As an example, one needs only to look at Lake Tahoe's public access and the associated economic benefit that accrues to adjacent towns to understand the value of this protection. Any property rights argument neglects that there is a public interest in keeping a resource available for the benefit of all, not just to profit a potential few. Without this designation, we would be at the mercy of outside interests who could bury our river and rob us of the river's scenic and economic value. Personally, I have long enjoyed the recreational opportunities of the river between Highway 49 and Electra, the beauty of the wildflowers in the spring, the taste of succulent wild blackberries, and the refreshing feel of a cool stream on a hot summer's day. It is important to retain this resource for us and generations to come. Thank you. Bruce Judici, Valley Springs.
Matuxus, Kutiaima. I just said greetings. How are you? How many can say Matuxus? When you go out here, this is all Miwok land from Yosemite to Sacramento on down to the Bay Area. You say Matuxus out there, and the plant life, the waters, even the stone people will recognize those words. They'll hear you. I am the great-granddaughter of Johnny and Tilly Jeff, the granddaughter of Manuel and Eva Jeff, the daughter of Jim and Francis Grow. I'm full-blood Miwok. That's all I have. Now I apologize because I didn't have anything written down, so I'm just going to speak from my heart, my spirit, and my DNA. This water here is sacred water. All over here. We are sacred life givers. The women who have had children, we call them sacred life givers. We carry that sacred water. Not one person in here is here without being born from those sacred waters. We hold the waters very, very important, and we show respect for them. You will not see that when we travel anywhere that we have been seen that we were there because we leave nothing and we will pick up extra. That's how we were taught. I even went as far as to North Dakota when they were fighting that pipeline and they were poisoning that water, and I stood in solidarity with the Lakota and the Dakota people because it could happen here too. So when I say these waters are sacred, this land is sacred, and then I see these words of there might not be some wildlife there, we didn't see it, it's because we believe that there's a seen and an unseen world. We know that there are critters that go to those waters. When we pray, we call all four directions, as far as the east is from the west, as far as the north is from the south. And we call the little creepy crawlies, the winged ones, the ones that swim in the waters, the plant people, the stone people. Many people say that we apologize for taking your land, Marge. You were the first ones here. And I say, actually, no, I wasn't. The stone people were. The plant people were. We recognize them. We respect them. So when I was asked to come here today, I said, absolutely. I didn't realize it'd been 9 years ago. I was fighting the same thing. Tom reminded me, 2009, you did a speech in front of East Bay Mud, and it's like, wow, Creator has me doing this circle all the time when I haven't completed something. So whatever you need from me, I'm also a women's spiritual leader. I just signed a treaty with the indigenous women of the Americas fighting to protect our sacred waters all over Turtle Island. That's what we call the Americas. Every bit is Turtle Island. This is Mother Earth. We honor that. We respect that. I thank you for listening to me.
I'm Colleen Platt with myvalleysprings.com, and I'm commenting also on behalf of Joyce Teckel, who's also our president. She's not able to be here tonight. Can't see her up here. We want to thank the department for the report, and we appreciate And then in Chapter 5, where the draft study debunks the myths about the effects of wild and scenic designation, and especially on land uses and future water projects. And we just asked you to keep the following excerpts in the final report. We've turned in written comments that are more thorough than what I'm able to discuss right now, but so I'll just summarize. In the topic of land use, this has been mentioned before, the Act does not permit the taking of private property for public uses without just compensation, and the Act has never been used in its 45-year history to condemn or otherwise take land. Grazing levels are low in the study area and will continue to be low in the future, and current grazing practices do not significantly affect the free-flowing condition or the other conditions, and they would not be affected by wild and scenic status. The agricultural uses, the Act imposes no restrictions on agricultural operations on lands adjacent to the designated rivers. In future land use, the public lands would generally be managed similar to how these lands are currently managed, and future land use on local government and privately held lands outside the designated river corridor would be unaffected by the designation. So basically the conclusion, future land uses would be generally unaffected by inclusion of these segments into the state system. And in addressing the topic of future water projects, and I'm just going to shorten this to Calaveras County, who has identified 6 potential water supply projects to meet its projected long-term water supply needs. But these projects are all at a conceptual level, and they cannot be considered at this time to be feasible without more detailed feasibility studies. The CRB concluded that state wild and scenic river designation continues to have a negligible impact on regulation of designated rivers, in particular with respect to adversely affecting water diversion applications. In a review of determinations in the past 12 years, almost all diversions were approved by the Secretary. In addition, flow reductions in the 5 river segments could be permitted without adversely affecting free-flowing conditions. A couple more comments quickly. As was mentioned, environmental regulations such as CEQA would have more impact on a project than wild and scenic, and many types of projects could be developed upstream of designated segments. Therefore, wild and scenic river designation would not foreclose any future projects known at this time, and there would be no effect on regional and local economies from project foreclosure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Fuqua, and I'm here with the Community Action Project and Calaveras Planning Coalition. I'm also here to offer my deepest gratitude to the agency for their wisdom in including the 37 miles of the Mokelumne River as wild and scenic. I've been enjoying this special place since I was a teenager and making my first trip rafting with my dad when I was 16. I've gathered with loved ones along the river and in those picnic spots that are nestled among the grasses and the trees. We know the Electra Road Beach is a favorite spot among many. And in fact, the very first river that she put her little newborn toes in was the Mokelumne River right there. This river provides an abundance for activities that people have been enjoying for generations, and the preservation of these wild spaces for those who come after us is a really important part of our legacy, and this wild and scenic designation ensures that it will be able to be enjoyed for generations to come, so I thank you for that.
Hello, my name is Abby Fuqua, and I thank you for protecting this special river for my generation. I am proud to say that when I have my own kids, this will be the river they first put their feet in, too, as how I first did. Thank you.
My name is Teresa Simpson. I am the Stewardship Director for California for American Whitewater. American Whitewater is a nonprofit organization devoted to protecting and restoring American whitewater resources and to enhancing the public's ability to enjoy them safely. American Whitewater is a membership organization with over 6,000 members and 100 affiliate clubs representing whitewater paddlers across the nation. California affiliate clubs include Loma Prieta Paddlers, Gold Country Paddlers, Chico Paddleheads, and NorCal River Runners. Our organization has spent more than 2 decades on river restoration efforts to mitigate impacts of existing water development projects in the Mokelumne watershed. American Whitewater specifically is currently an active member of the Ecological Resource Committee working with PG&E to manage the FERC Mokelumne River Project 137. I am here today to thank the CNRA for the recommendation to include the Mokelumne in the State Wild and Scenic Act, and I wanted to let people know that hundreds of paddlers come to the Mokelumne River on an annual basis. On Tiger Creek alone, BLM has determined whitewater recreation visitor surveys average 500 to 600 paddlers for 7 to 9 days of recreational paddling days annually. That's hundreds of paddlers that come to Mokelumne. We spend our money at the gas stations, we spend our money at the restaurants, we spend our money at the hotels in the area. And we are pleased that whitewater was recognized in 4 of the 5 segments as a unique value of the Mokelumne River. Thanks so much.
My name is Rich Farrington. I'm speaking as the Upcountry Director for District 3 of the Amador Water Agency. Water is critical to the livelihood and economies of Amador and Calaveras counties. I support the 3 special provisions recommended in the AB 142 report to protect our water rights. These provisions are critical to protecting our water supplies. However, in the 142 report, it should acknowledge the prediction of droughts up to 9 years long in the climate change sections in Chapter 3.5 and 4.5.1 based on the analysis in the 2017 AWA Long-Term Water Needs Study on page 38. A 9-year drought would exhaust the water supply of some 3,500 customers in Amador County, upcountry. In the 2014-15 drought, the state stopped AWA from taking water from the Mokelumne River for upcountry customers, those 3,500. However, we had, that's because we had a low seniority of that water right. Fortunately, we had enough water stored in Lower Bear River Reservoir as a backup for 1 year, but there would not be enough water for a 9-year drought. The 9-year drought, coupled with the report, acknowledged 173,000 acre-feet of water lost from the upper water reservoirs because of the shift, the warming and shift of elimination of the snowpack and basically all the precipitation coming down in the wintertime and overflowing the reservoirs, winding up with much less water in the dry period. That's 58 billion gallons of water lost from the upper reservoirs due to the loss of the snowpack, which would be catastrophic to water supplies in Amador County, as well as to fish, wildlife, and recreationists. Disclosure of the significant cumulative impact on water supplies of 9-year droughts with the predicted reduction in river flow that I just mentioned is required by AB 142. This information reinforces the need for the special provisions in the report. Proposals to add storage in the upper reservoirs in the future could be blocked without these provisions and cause people, fish, and wildlife to suffer. We should learn from the Anasazi Indians who abandoned their cliff dwellings 700 years ago in long droughts because they had no stored water. And I would like to recommend a 4th special provision should be added that prohibits the state from seeking federal wild and scenic river designation of the Mokelumne. The restriction is already in existing state law on another wild and scenic river. Federal designation of the Mokelumne River would impose restrictions on property rights and land use that could prevent badly needed thinning of forests in the Mokelumne watershed to protect water quality from catastrophic wildfire. With the protection of our water rights. I think my board would support Wild and Scenic River designation for the Mokelumne to prevent LA from building a new dam on our river. Thank you.
My name is Michael Weir. I work for California Trout. We are a state-wide nonprofit organization. Our mission is ensuring resilient populations of wild fish thriving in clean waters for a better California. And we support a wild and scenic designation for the Mokelumne River. We feel that it is one of those such habitats that has the ability to support native wild salmonids. And very importantly, the Mokelumne has a quality cold water habitat that can support salmonids into the future. So if current trends persist, things get warmer as they have been, the Mokelumne is one of those habitats that can support native salmonids well into the future. And we believe that preserving the integrity of the free-flowing stretches is a healthy step forward. Also for its recreational value and opportunity. You know, you can just take a quick Google search anywhere to see that ecotourism, not just in California, not just in America, but worldwide, is becoming a huge economic generator for communities. And the Mokelumne has the potential to provide ecotourism for this community. If managed correctly, the Mokelumne could be a world-class trophy trout fishery, which, you know, the numbers are easy to look up, bring a lot of money to the community, and money that comes to the community without taking anything out of it. So through paddling, through fishing, through, you know, wildflower walks, stuff like that, people can come here, bring money to the community without extracting resources from the river. And so important to maintain those free-flowing stretches for their value as native salmonid refugia, recreational opportunities, and opportunities for people to get out there. You know, I grew up on the Mokelumne. I'm probably one of the few people that's hiked, fished in, swam, paddled all these different stretches of the Mokelumne, and it has had a profound effect on my life. I've spent the last 20 years of my life, a good portion of my living is from being a professional fly fisherman. I've traveled all over the world, and that experience for me happened because I had the Mokelumne River right here. And so preserving that for future generations so that other people can have the same kind of opportunities is very important. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Fred Velasquez. I'm a traditional Native American cultural preservationist. I'm not a Miwok descendant. I'm like everyone else here. I came here, and but my work for the past 35 years has been protecting Native American cultural values. And once again, those are considerations that I haven't heard mentioned before. Maybe they are in the report. I haven't read it completely, so with not enough time. But I'm here to actually talk to you about water, because right now I see people, or I've heard people have been speaking about the economic benefits that they are afraid of losing because of the water, and they're controlling it or not controlling it, losing controlling it. And I go to schools. I've been going to school since 1968, and I always go like this to kids. I said, if you were a glass of water, this much of you is water, and the rest of you is minerals. Water is a sacred element. It's one of four that makes our entire world up for Native people. Air, earth, fire, water. If one of those things changes, life as we know it will not be the same. I'm here to tell you all, water is not the same as it was when you were born. Maybe some of you are too young to have noticed that, but it is not the same. There are PCBs in our water. They're in the water cycle. They come from the ocean, and they come down as the rain, and they go into our systems. They collect in the fat tissues in our bodies. Women give it in their breast milk to their children. Since the atmospheric testing and World War II, radiation is included in that. Fukushima. All of these things that have happened because of the society way we structure our society, the way we live, and our lack of feeling responsible for some actions that our governments have taken on our behalf. And apparently, the most negative impacts have come from our form of government, from our American government. We have created things that have caused those, our way of living. And we can't reverse that, but we can slow it down by stopping doing what we've been doing. And I ask you all to consider that, because you want your children to grow up and be healthy and have the same blessings of the land and the water and the air that you all had, but we're not giving that to them. Native people believed that was their birthright, was to grow up and raise their families and to provide for them what they had for themselves when they were young and when they were growing up, and to keep going on to the 7th generation. So water is not something to be fought over, although in this society that we live in, water is power. Those who control the water have the power, and you know that. You've seen it. You all know it. Agencies are developed that tell us how we're going to do it and how to control it and how to manage it and how to regulate it. But that doesn't change the nature of water. It is so basic. It is my personal healing mechanism. It's what I use to help people who are ill. And it's a very different job now because it has those elements in it. So that's what I came to say. I had a lot of other things I wanted to say, but those aren't as important as what I've just shared with you. Please consider that.
My name is Liz Gregg, and I'm the Associate Director for the Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center in Twain Harte. I'd like to express our center's approval for the report to nominate the Mokelumne River as a California Wild and Scenic River. Our center strongly supports the study's recommendation to include all 5 of the segments. As my colleague Heidi will tell you in just a few minutes, we support this river for the value to rare wildlife and habitat connectivity. But beyond those values, we feel that this special river corridor provides exceptional recreational opportunities and aesthetic qualities for both residents and visitors. As mentioned in the report, the segments A through E range from extraordinary to excellent recreational resources when they're evaluated individually. But when considered as a whole, they're overall extraordinary because of the wide range of opportunities. As a conservationist, I believe that getting out and experiencing the natural world is essential to building the mindset and the motivation to protect it. The experiences people have in this unique place build appreciation and a desire to preserve its wild and scenic nature, as well as to protect other natural places like this. Many of the people sitting in this room and speaking here tonight have been inspired by recreational experiences associated with the Mokelumne River. We would like to see the river's unique character, recreational activities, and ecological integrity be preserved for future generations so that they can develop the same appreciation through their experiences. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heidi Beswick, and I'm a biologist representing the Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center. According to the study report, the wildlife values in the study area are not considered extraordinary because the rich species diversity and important habitats are not solely unique to the Mokelumne River. But whether or not the presence of these diverse and often sensitive species is considered extraordinary, the river's habitat has undeniable high ecological value. The river corridor provides connectivity over a wide elevation range and a variety of habitats, which allows species to be resilient to environmental changes. That is truly significant in a time of climate change. The eligible segments of the Mokelumne River are home to many wildlife species that are often stressed, blocked, or otherwise at risk outside the river corridor. Although other river systems elsewhere may be occupied by similar wildlife, this rugged, undisturbed section of the Mokelumne represents a great opportunity to preserve a healthy ecosystem. Wildlife encounters are integral to the natural experience and are among the reasons thousands of visitors come to the river each year. The diverse habitat and wildlife enhance the Mokelumne River's scenic and recreation values, and they deserve our protection. I strongly support the recommendation for 5 segments of the Mokelumne River to be formally designated as wild and scenic in order to preserve their legacy values. Thank you.
Good evening, Vicki Reinke. I'm with Calaveras County Republican Party, and we've been following this issue now for several years. I wanted just to kind of point out, of course, we all love the Mokelumne River. We all love our rivers. We love our lakes. Nobody in their right mind would want to damage our water sources here and enjoy the recreational purposes of. What I want to do is kind of remind people that the Mokelumne River, in the sense that it's been free-flowing, the way that it's written in the law, it has never been free-flowing. It's always had some kind of dams put on it for purposes. And for example, in the 1850s, there was a diversion put on the river for the gold mining and hydraulic mining purposes. So that was kind of started in the 1850s. And in the 1897, it was utilized for generation of hydroelectric power at the Blue Lakes Powerhouse near the headwaters of the power for local communities. So in the 1897, it became dammed for the purpose of electricity. And then in 1929, East Bay Mud built the Pardee Dam so they could have water down in the Bay Area. And then there was the the lake was also added in 1963, the Comanche Dam. And I know today that the whitewaters happen when PG&E lets water out of the upper dam so that people have water to go canoeing down or recreationally. And I guess one of my points is, had that never happened, had we not had those higher dams put in and the PG&E, I would bet these last 4 years when we had a drought, we would have no water in the Mokelumne because there was no snow leading in and the rain was very light. So I guess my point is that dams are not a bad thing. They can be a good thing. And the water is preserved that way for all of us to use all year round and not just in the spring when the snow melts or the rains are here. So I just want to make that point for people to realize we have a beautiful river. We have all been enjoying it for hundreds of years, and it's not going to go away. And sadly, a designation for a wild and scenic river by the state of California will take future water rights away from the citizens. And when we're gone and there's a need for another upper dam or something to help the people with their water issues, will be taken away from them. And that's why we're opposed to a wild and scenic, because we believe that water rights should be available for future generations, and that's the only downside. Otherwise, we have a beautiful wild and scenic river. We don't need to give it to the state of California. Thank you.
My name's Steve Evans. I represent Friends of the River. We're a statewide river conservation group that's been around since 1973. We were organized to stop the filling of the New Maloney's Reservoir, trying to save the Stanislaus, something we were ultimately unsuccessful at, but we went on to apply those lessons learned to other rivers. I've been involved in every state wild and scenic river study and state legislature designation of state wild and scenic rivers in California since 1988. So I guess I'm something of an expert. I want to commend the Resources Agency and the consultants for doing an excellent report. I think the most instructive part of the report was put in under a provision that we asked for in the study legislation, that is the California Research Bureau appendix, that indicates that in fact local counties can access water from state wild and scenic rivers. It's been routinely done, just from my perspective as someone who lives in Sacramento, there is a water diversion facility on the Lower American River, which is both a federal and state wild and scenic river, the size of this building. And its capacity was doubled in 2005 when it was both a federal and state river. So it's absolutely untrue that designation precludes all kinds of water diversions. It would, to be clear, preclude the Devil's Nose Dam, long proposed by some folks on the Mokelumne River. It would preclude East Bay Mud from enlarging Pardee Reservoir and flooding the river up past Highway 49. I think those are all things that people agree probably aren't great ideas. And that's our intent with this designation. Someone earlier expressed concern about state designation leading to federal designation. I don't think that can happen anymore in terms of the provision in the Federal Act that allows the state governor to petition the Interior Secretary to add a state river to the federal system without congressional approval or the state legislature approval. It hasn't happened since 1981. Almost every river that's gone into the state system has had a provision saying the governor can't do this. So I don't think it's an issue. Someone also said that federal designation would preclude use of their private property on the river. To be clear, just like state designation, federal designation does not affect private property or private land use whatsoever. There's no federal or state authority over private property or private land use unless you're applying for a water rights permit. But as the report very explicitly indicates, most water rights permits on state designated wild and scenic rivers have been approved. It wouldn't preclude Calaveras or Amador County putting a straw into the river to access water, a reasonable amount of water that wouldn't adversely affect the flow of the river. The big question is, would designation affect Amador County's plans to perhaps expand Lower Bear Reservoir? And the answer to that is we don't know, because frankly, no one in Amador County has really come up with a feasibility report on that, so we don't know what they're proposing. But it would allow reasonable access to water for local domestic use, and that's important to keep in mind. Thank you.
I'm Ralph Aldridge. I'm resident of Angels Camp. I'm also the publisher of the Calaveras Enterprise in San Andreas. And I'm not here to give you my personal opinions, but rather to talk a little bit about the process. The decision here is going to be made by the state legislature. That's ultimately where the rubber hits the road. And so when you think about what those legislators are going to have in mind when they make that decision, you would hope that they would have listened to all of the anecdotal statements made by people and understand the depth of people's feelings about that. But my guess is they're going to pay more attention to just what they think are the overall feelings of all of the people in the area. And so they're going to be searching for numbers. Well, I've got some numbers already. We started running a poll on our Calaveras Enterprise website a week ago. And the numbers on that poll so far are about 400 have voted. We gave them 5 choices. 281 favored the wild and scenic designation. 51 opposed. 9 had no opinion. And then we gave them a chance to express the depth of their feelings about this by having 2 questions. One asking if they were willing to volunteer their time, their money, and to work to support the designation or to oppose it. And 50 said that they would be willing to work in favor of the designation, and 8 said that they would work against it. Now, if we just stopped right there, I think that would be pretty conclusive for a legislator about how the people in the area feel. But that's a small sample so far. Our poll's only been up for 1 week. We've had as many as 4,000 votes on a poll like this, the one on cannabis, which got a lot of interest. I'm not sure we'd get there with this one, but I do think that this is important, and I will be happy to submit this information as part of the package that goes to the legislature. And I want to make one more suggestion. Anyone who might be interested in working with us to come up with a good survey where you can be a little bit more nuanced than just a poll, and we can use, we'd be happy to allow your use of our website, and we can distribute it through our publications as a paper survey as well. And I think we could really reach most of the people in this area that way. We reach all 3 counties with some of our publications, and our website's viewed by people all over the area. So that's what I have to offer, and good luck.
My name is Mickey Williamson, and I live in Calaveras County, and I am a member of the Calaveras Planning Coalition, and I'm speaking pretty much, though, personally and anecdotally, and I wanted to make my case particularly, I love the report and I thank you for your thoroughness, but I want to emphasize the accessibility part of the benefit of this. And taking particularly of segment E, the lowest segment, which is in some ways the least wild and scenic because it's more impacted by population. But because it is so accessible is what makes it so unique and important to our counties. Just a little story. In the report, you mentioned that the Oars Rafting Company does a fundraiser rafting for the Foothill Conservancy, and they do. And I want you also to know that they do annual fundraising rafting for the Calaveras Youth Mentoring Program. They've done that for 10 years. And if you don't know the Calaveras Youth Mentoring Program, it's a program that matches volunteer adults with children, teens, and young adults who just need another friendly adult in their life. And I was matched with my mentee 3 years ago, and in just the first few months of that time, we had the opportunity to participate on the rafts with one of those fundraising trips. And it was a pretty amazing experience to see this young girl who was 11, who had never been on the river in a raft before, see that she could be part of a team that could maneuver that raft down the river. And it was really one of the highlights of our first year together. And those 10 years of those fundraising trips for the Mentoring Foundation have raised over $35,000 for the foundation. So and it's the accessibility of that section that makes that possible. If they were to have to run a trip like that, on some of the other rivers that are far away, they just wouldn't happen. So, along those lines, I love to use that section of the river for wildflower viewing. And when the wildflowers are out, I don't think there's any place better to see wildflowers. And they're right there. People don't have to go very far off Highway 49 to see them. So I really appreciate that we could protect that for the people in our counties and for the people who come to visit. We know that water is essential for life, but also beauty, nature, recreation are essential for a life well lived. And the thing I really appreciate about your report is that it says it's not either or. We can have both. So thank you very much.
My name is Penny Sarvis. I live in Murphy's, and I'm a member of Ebbets Pass Forest Watch. Earlier, someone read a poem from a local poet, Muriel Zeller, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, and she wrote a triptych about the river. And so this is another part of that triptych. It's another poem that she wrote called I Am the River. Listen to me. I am the wild utterance you have tried to tame. I am the flowing night, the wet dawn. I am the cold sweat of the earth saying I am afraid. I am the expectation of the revelation to come. I am the river straining against your claims. I am the willow and the bird. I am the basket of corn. I am the cool antidote to summer's heat. I am the knife that cuts a canyon through stone. You are a sponge. I am the boundary between two counties. I am the rafter's adrenaline rush. I am the innkeeper's bottom line. I am Miwok identity. What more do you want from me? I am my mountainous headwaters. I am electricity. I am the Mokelumne. I am flowing from faucets in the East Bay. But even I am not infinite. I am a gift from God, but I am not God. Only you can exercise intervention approaching the divine. Only you can save me. I want to thank you for this excellent report and for the contribution it makes to saving this amazing stretch of river. Thank you.
I'm Alan Willard, and I've lived in West Point for most of my life, all of my life really. When my parents moved up in 1947, they became part of a large number of people who were basically young professionals, and they brought a lot of dynamic community activity with them as young people, and adding many school children to our schools. It made our community a vibrant place. We're looking, it's no secret that Calaveras County, especially the District 2 end, has financial difficulties and has problems keeping people living up there. I really look forward to the designation of wild and scenic. The combination of wild and scenic and the Coast to Crest Trail is going to attract young professionals to this region. It's going to be an asset, a feather in our cap, and I look very much forward to having more young people coming into our area. I guess I should also add that good broadband computer access is going to be important to those three things, to bring young professionals up into our area who do find it beautiful, and they can live and work up here using internet, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for the report that you did. I support Wild and Scenic for the river, and Bob Leitzel, I live in Mokelumne Hill. We recently moved here from Golden Hills, which was still in the Mokelumne Hill area. It's been mentioned that there's been no threat to the river, so why do we need Wild and Scenic? Well, that's not true. The Foothill Conservancy brought a lawsuit against East Bay Mud, who planned to raise Pardee Reservoir, which would have flooded the river from Pardee on up to the 49 Bridge. And that is probably the most accessible portion of the river, other than the fact between the 49 and Electra Powerhouse. I've been on the river a couple of times on a rafting trip. There is no actual rafting company allowed to do rafting on the river at this time other than for fundraisers. That may change in the future. They'll probably be required to meet strict conditions for commercial rafting, and it may not go to oars. It may go to some other company. So I support the Wild and Scenic designation as a 35-year resident of the county and of Mokelumne Hill. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Musgrove. I'm also supporting the American Whitewater, and the proposition that's been put forward here I strongly support. I just wanted to give my example. I'm obviously English, and the reason that I moved to this area is the river. I spent 15 years considering this and came to this area because of that, and I just want to offer the economic benefit that people like me could bring to this area. We have been excited by the opportunity to kayak this river. The team that organizes the moke races and other competitions is something that my family is getting into. My daughter just came and kayaked on this river for the first time this year, and I hope to bring my other daughter to experience this as well. I'd also just ask one question. There's another section of river above the main reservoir that's not included in this section, which I would say is an extremely exciting, wild and scenic section of the river known as Fantasy Falls above this, and that is a unique and special place, and I'd say that ought to be considered as part of this overall program as well. If there was expansion of that reservoir above, then that particular section would also be lost, which is a truly special part of the river. So just to offer that perspective.
Hi, my name is Carol Mars. We own property along the Mokelumne River from Electra to the Ponderosa Bridge. I've been to a number of these meetings. I hear these reports. I guess I really don't know what the truth is. If you say something often enough, it becomes the truth. So, my own opinion is, if they were to raise the dam up above, why do we need the wild and scenic? Salt Springs on down to almost Electra is never going to change. I mean, it's a steep canyon. There's never going to be development. Hopefully, if the dam is raised up above, we will continue to have water. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. So the three of us are going to be around stationed back there for anybody else that has questions. I thank everybody for coming out here. I know Joey does. Your sacrifice in the evening, it shows how important this is to you. It's important to all of us. Just great input, diversity of opinion. We can't keep every single person happy, but we are going to look at all the comments we received and really think about what we're recommending, how can we tweak it to make it better, and I just, from the bottom of my heart, I just appreciate everybody's passion, no matter what it is. It's just a good, solid meeting. Thank you very much for participating, and the three of us will be around to discuss, answer questions as best we can.
Thank you.